even if someone were to win the lottery, there's also the problem of habit. The fact that people are willing to go and buy lottery tickets just because they win the lottery doesn't mean they're going to stop.
Right.
Someone might take that victory and say, "Hey, I won the lottery. If that means I won the lottery, I can certainly do it again."
Welcome to Culmination, where everything comes together. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me the engineering student, Ron Bejerano, to discuss risks and what they entail. So with that said, let's get started. So Ron, how would you define a risk?
Well, thank you very much for speaking with me today, Casey. So,
Of course, thanks for joining me.
to answer your question, I would consider risks to be anything that has some kind of element of danger involved. So it doesn't have to be a physical danger or, as most people would assume, but it could be financial danger, emotional danger, even spiritual danger if that's a risk that you're worth taking. But anything that can put you or someone that you love or anything that you care about in some kind of danger is what I would assume to be a risk.
I see. So I guess that begs the obvious question. Why would we ever take a risk if there could be danger involved?
Well, then this kind of goes into the realm of risk versus reward. Because usually when people don't take risks just for the fun of it. I mean, obviously some people do. I mean, you could go rock climbing or go to the top of Mount Everest. That's inherently a risk. But
Right.
why do people climb Mount Everest? It's that they could go to the tallest mountain on the world, say they've stood on top of the world.
Right.
That's the reward in it. It's the reward of glory, of honor, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
generally, risk and reward are kind of the opposite in that people usually take a danger to themselves or to others in order to reach some kind of end goal, some kind of end motivation, that ambition that really helps them move forward, and it kind of makes the risk worth it.
So how would you go about calculating these risks versus rewards in any given thing?
So obviously, there in some cases, like financial and economic risks, there's a whole bunch of formulas involved. But in general, I would
Right.
assume that risks is more about what you stand to achieve versus what you stand to lose. So if you put in, let's just say, if you're gonna go put in a huge monetary investment, say $100,000, and this is for some kind of business or entrepreneurship or something that you plan or you intend to make that will make you, let's say, $500,000 down the line.
Mm-hmm.
But if your business doesn't take off, that's $100,000 that you won't ever get back. But if the business does take off, that's $500,000 plus any additional that you might make. And that's just
Right.
on the monetary side. You might have a whole host of other rewards, such as you might get into new positions, new opportunities, but you also might lose positions and opportunities. So it's all a balance of what you have, what you want, and how much you're willing to wager for it.
Right. And I guess that's another important thing to think about when it comes to these risks and rewards. If you think too much about the failure or the dangers of it, you probably won't have as much success in the end because you're not exactly looking forward, but you're looking backward as if you were driving with your eyes closed.
Exactly. I mean, there are some times where people kind of some people look blindly forward, not realizing what's going on behind them, or kind of ignoring the past. And there's people who focus too much on the past and seem to think that the past will act as a precedent for the future. And
Right.
there's no real way to kind of differentiate between the two, but you have to just be sure that you kind of take into account both what happened in the past, how you can use that information to help make your decisions in the future, and with that, kind
Hmm.
of calculate the risk and analyze the risk you're willing to make.
Yeah, because like if you're looking too much, or if you look at the past, it definitely shows you a gauge of like, okay, if something worked, maybe that'll have some significance of it working again in the future. And then like if something didn't work, the same rule applies. But also I like that you said that if you look too much into the past, sometimes you'll think that everything will just happen exactly the way it did, but that's not exactly the case. Like it's a gauge, but just like a gauge, it's like it's not a confirmation, it's just a probability, you know?
Right. I mean,
And
if there's anything if that's life has taught us is that there's always a monkey to throw a wrench into your plans. It's no matter how many times you can think things through or go through all the different plans and different situations that you could find yourself in, there's always going to be some undetected problem, some issue that you didn't foresee, and that's part of taking the risk.
right. But also like everything's different too. Like every occurrence, even if it's theoretically the same type of situation, it's always going to be slightly different because all of the factors will change over time. So, like, let's say in the past, you've tried to ask out a girl and you got rejected or something. It's like you think about what worked and you try to do that again, and you think about what didn't work and resolve those things. But even if, like, let's say it did work out and you didn't get rejected, and you try that same thing, that same exact approach that you did the first time again, it's like you might not necessarily guarantee success, even though it worked exactly how you wanted it in the past, because everything's so different. You're a different person now. It's a different person that you're pursuing. It's a different time. It's a different scenario. You're in a different place than you were in. Maybe you don't exactly replicate your formula that worked in the past. There's just like a lot of things that are different.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I mean, in such a case where you're say you're pursuing someone and it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that if you try the same thing that it won't work out with the next person that you try, but it also
Right.
might mean that it might not work out. It's just that the strategy might be the same, but the situation is different. The people are
Yeah.
different, and there's no real way to kind of transfer. I mean, there are some things that I'm sure that will obviously help. So, let's say having more confidence in such a situation will surely help you be able to, be more on your feet and kind of make more of a bold move. But
Right.
um, maybe taking her out to dinner, maybe taking one girl out to dinner might not be the same as taking another girl out to dinner. So it's very,
Right.
very different.
Yeah, it could be as simple as this person liked Chipotle. This person likes Red Lobster or something. I don't know. Like even the restaurant could be something different.
I mean, certainly. I mean, there are people who enjoy different things, and there are people who expect different things out of different partners. I mean, someone might want someone more who's more ambitious, who maybe wants to, rise the ranks and do really well and achieve, and other people might want someone who is willing to settle down, have a family,
Right.
and that's up to everyone's discretion, and that's kind of what you need to and understand what you have, kind of what you're willing to put forth and what you're willing to accept and see, and if she'll reject you or if she'll accept you or something, and that goes for both ways. It doesn't have to be guys except pursuing girls, it could be girls pursuing guys, and in general, that
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
situation.
Right. And I guess that kind of segues into this idea that like only take a risk if you're sure that you want to, Like don't just pursue somebody when it has consequences or rewards just because you want the reward or something. Like, you have to think about it. You have to think, is this something worth my time, worth my interest? Is this somebody who I care a lot about and want to pursue in a romantic light? Are these, like, is what I'm risking too big to really handle if it doesn't go well, Like, you have to really gauge, okay, here's the rewards, here are the risks, here's what I'll gain from this, here's what I'll lose, and this applies to everything that's a risk. It's just like, don't just do it just because you think it's right or something. It's like you really have to think about it,
Yeah, I mean, that begs that you actually brought up a really interesting point about when taking risks, do you go more analytically and do you kind of analyze all the situations, or are you more impulsively kind of going for it? I mean, in life and in all these different situations, there's different aspects of both. I mean, on one
Right.
hand, you want to analyze all the different opportunities and chances that might arise, but on the other hand, if you always keep checking the situation and that situation, you might never even be willing to take the risk. And sometimes just
Right.
taking the risk blindly is something you have to do.
That's true, yeah. Like, we see successes both ways. It's like somebody who has calculated this, thought a lot about it, and then they ended up getting with somebody after, like, taking a smart approach. But also, you see all the time people who are just like, I don't know, like, you go up to them and ask, like, do you like that person? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, so what are you gonna do? And they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go ask them out. And I'm like, well, wait, aren't you gonna, like, think about the risks or whatever? And he's like, nope, I'm just gonna do it. And it could work out. Like, some people just work in that simple sense. It's like, what are you doing analyzing all the time? Just do it.
Exactly, exactly. And I mean, in some case, I mean, sometimes that makes life a lot more simple and it makes it a lot more entertaining. I mean, there are people who, I mean, I don't consider myself one of these people, but there are obviously
Right. Yeah, yeah.
there are some people who might say, life's too short. Just try it out. I mean, sometimes life's gonna, hit you back and life's gonna, break you down and everything. But if you get that one lucky chance, just take it and run.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like both sides of the aisle have their benefits and downfalls. It's like the carpe diem, seize the day type philosophy there. It's good to think like, oh, life is short, so I should just make the most out of what I have. But that could also lead to an instance where you're doing something just for the sake of doing it when it's not really calculated, you haven't really thought through it, but you're just trying to experience as much as you can. It could almost become obsessive. So, like, that could be the downside, while the upside is you're truly making the most out of your time on this earth. Um, while the analytical route is definitely like a more time consuming, like, thoughtful account. If it works out, then I think it'll be probably a lot more meaningful, and probably more structurally sound because they thought through, like, the foundations of, okay, if I'm pursuing somebody, this is what it'll look like when we're together or something. Like, it's very set up, it's very structured in a good way, but it could also be a bad thing because you, like you said, kind of psych yourself out and don't even feel ready to take the risk at the end of the day, meaning all of your hard work is kind of useless.
I
uh
mean, even let's say that you do muster up the courage to go over and ask them out and say you calculated all the plans. And that, I mean, what happens if they still reject you, even if after what you tried and everything you did that it doesn't work out? You might feel
exactly.
that all that effort that you put in was not only useless, but kind of worked against you, and that you
Right.
might feel more, I feel more negativity. You might feel, more a little bit more hurt by that rejection than if someone who was just blindly pursuing someone, just kind of going with the flow might feel if they were rejected.
Right. Yep. I agree with that. It's I feel like there's something to be said about both of them in the sense that it would be good to kind of look at, like, try to make the best out of both of them and do it by case basis. It's like if you're pursuing somebody and this seems like a really complicated situation, you might have to sit down and think about it for an evening. Even if you're an impulsive guy, you gotta think about it.
Right.
But maybe sometimes it's really just that simple. Like, just do it, dude. Like, I'm
Yeah,
kind of talking to myself here too. It's like I keep thinking and thinking. I'm very analytical, and it's like, it's really amusing to me when I talk to somebody who has that other mindset of like, just do it, because I bet they just look at me like, this guy is an idiot. Like, he keeps thinking and thinking. It's so simple, dude. Just do the thing. And I'm like, no, dude, calculus, TI 484 Texas Instrument calculator, shit like that, you know? Like, it's just,
exactly. I mean, honestly, I think having exposure to both is what really kind of opens your eyes. I mean, having that side of understanding, what's the benefits, what's the risks, and everything, but also, just forgetting all what you just said and just go for it. Because
right.
sometimes you need a little bit of both in life.
Yeah. So, I guess kind of moving along here. Ron, tell me, what's what's a time in your life where you had to take a risk?
Um, well, there's been plenty of those coming along, but I would say the most prominent one in my life most recently would definitely be my decision to go out of state for my university.
I
So
see.
I go to a university where I don't, it's not in my state, and I have to fly there, and it's certainly not an easy experience. I mean, for me to get home for breaks and everything, it takes a whole day, whereas someone in state might take a few hours.
Right.
Um, and being far away from home for such a long period of time has certainly had both its ups and its downs. I mean, on one hand, when you're young and when you're in middle school and everything, you're able to kind of rely on that support system that you have, your siblings, your parents, your family, your friends. But when you're going to university, you're kind of thrust into a new world. You don't have that support system anymore. It's all new,
Right.
all kind of swirling about.
You're on
Um,
your own, yeah.
exactly, and that's even for in-state. If you're going out of state, it's like that situation, but now you have to be independent completely.
Right, yeah.
So I mean, when I made the journey over here, I was kind of like this, kind of like stepping off, kind of like a growing up point for me, where I could relied on my parents and my family for so long, and now that I'm here at this university so far away, I kind of have to fend for myself, and I have to understand that all the decisions that I make are my own, all the all the risks and all the benefits that I make, I have to deal with. It's not someone else's problem now. It's my problem.
Right.
And I mean, I think that's also it's dangerous, but it's also kind of beautiful in a way. Because I mean, the amount of times that I've screwed up while out here and kind of lost my way and kind of needed to step back and kind of understand what I'm doing is too much to count while I'm at this university. But I feel like going to this university, even if it's in such a far off place, is kind of what helps me. I mean, when I spoke with my family about it, sure, they were a little bit, miffed and a bit like, I mean, they understood why. But I also thought of it as kind of like a new chapter in my life. I mean, do I want to stick around home for the rest of my life, or do I want to kind of explore a little bit?
Mm. So, you kinda touched upon it, but why? Why did you go for it? Like, what was the final thing? Because obviously you probably thought a lot about it, but what was the final thing that capped your entire decision?
Um, so when I chose this university, I was really debating between two of them. So I was debating between this university and one of the universities that was closer to home.
Okay.
And really, what kind of made my decision is uh, I felt that I would be able to not only get a better understanding of what I want to pursue in life as a career by going to this university, but also get a better understanding of myself. I have had both. I have two siblings. Both of them went to the university close to my house,
I see.
and having that kind of experience has allowed me to understand a bit of the culture there, a bit of how things work there, um, and kind of seeing what it's like. I wanted to see for myself. Maybe all universities aren't like that. I mean, that was really the only university I had experience with. So after I
Right.
came here for the tour and everything, just seeing how different it all was and everything, it was kind of eye opening, and for sure, I feel I could have succeeded at both, but I feel like here I was able to just kind of like be more exploratory of myself, see what works, what doesn't, and kind of have that rush, have that thrill of it's all I'm on my own. And sometimes I kind of took that spirit and I kind of ran with it. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but at least I know that I'm accountable for my decisions, and I think that's something that's really powerful.
Yeah. And I guess that brings up a good point. Like a lot of the time, a risk, like we usually think of risks as like a physical thing, like something that exists in the real world that if we, like if we are climbing a wall, like a rock climbing wall, then the risk is I'm gonna fall and hurt myself, with the reward being I'll get to the top and feel that sense of glory and honor, as you said. Um, but a risk can also be entirely in your head, and it's kind of how you described. It's like now you're independent. You're on your own. You're away from family, and that was a risk because obviously you'll miss them. It's an entirely new situation where you're alone, you're in a new world, and you have to fend for yourself. You have to take care of yourself. You have a new series of responsibilities that, frankly, never existed before. And yes, there is a level of physical risks involved, like that responsibility. But there's also this idea in your head that I feel could be entirely avoided if you think about it. Like this idea of independence could scare you because maybe you might feel in your head that you're not ready or something. But it could also feel invigorating, like you said, where you can just run with it. You can feel like, well, I'm on my own. I'm not really tied down by anyone. I can really try to experiment with things that I probably wouldn't be able to. Granted, if they're good ideas. uh, but, like, not everything has to be a risk. Like, sometimes it's entirely how you frame it in your mind.
I mean, certainly, um, there are some things that may seem dangerous and risky at first, but once you like go through them and kind of understand what you're willing to go forth, you kind of realize that it might not be such a bad thing after all. I mean,
Right.
um, like I think we mentioned this before, like the dating thing. Like take dating and the fact
Yeah.
that at first approaching someone might seem really risky and daunting, and it has a whole bunch of risks involved, emotional, physical, and mental risks as well. But after you kind of like approaching and seeing what the verdict is, you'll feel a heck of a lot better after doing it. You'll feel probably like, despite the result, and you'll probably feel a little bit more invigorated in the fact that yeah, I was able to do this, and I was
Right.
able to kind of understand a bit more about myself in the process.
Yeah. Because it's like if you got rejected, then at least like you're
Yeah,
not really floating in your head anymore of like You know, with the flower and the petals, she loves me not, like stuff like that. You're
Right.
not playing that game anymore. And if you know, if it works out, then there you go, it works out.
I think there's also the notion that whenever people take risks, they have to face it all alone.
Mm,
And I think, like you said, like when facing like in a romantic relationship, or the risk is usually by yourself, but sometimes there's risk in both. I mean, sometimes both people are have some interest or attraction to each other, but both are scared to kind of take that first step, and that's a risk on both to do it so. And sometimes there's risks where people take in groups. If for a physical example, the first expedition up Mount Everest, and I'll use this analogy a lot, but the first expedition up Mount
yeah,
Everest was really dangerous, and a lot of people could have been hurt or killed, and yet they still did it anyway.
yeah. It's like whether like if you're pursuing somebody romantically, it's like usually you can have buddies to talk to about like, do you think this is a good idea? Maybe they can give you some insight as to like more information to gauge, is this going to be a success, is this a failure? If it's climbing Mount Everest, you know, you have people who are supplying you with supplies uh, and other goods that you need to make this trek, this expedition, you know, like lights, boots, um, other heavy clothing items that are going to protect you from the cold, ropes, other gear. um, I don't know, like if you're playing a sport, then usually you're on a team or you have friends along the way who kind of support you. Like if you're climbing that rock wall, like you'll have people saying like when you're on the last stretch and you're feeling tired and you don't think you can make it, you have that one person by your side who's looking at your progress and saying, "Come on, let's go." Like
Exactly.
I remember that. It was like, "All right, well now I have to make it," you know?
Yeah, I mean, having a cheerleader in your corner definitely kind of helps and motivates you to do better. And knowing that like you're moving forward and you're kind of reaching new heights as it is with that support system is what can really help, make you achieve your goals. And I thought it was kind of interesting that you brought up, sports, because sports in its own right is a risk. I mean,
Right.
when I was in middle school and high school, I played basketball.
Mm.
And one of the things was that basketball is a very, very heavy team sport, and there's a lot of skill and talent involved.
Yep.
And one of the things that was I was able to interact with the rest of my team, and I thought we were doing a pretty good job. But as I mentioned, in sport, there's risk, and there was a game where I fractured my leg.
I see.
That fracture took me out of the game, and kind of I never really recovered from that injury, and it kind of ruined that competitive edge. But
Right.
that's true in any sport. It's true in any situation. Question is, what are you willing to do to fight back and bounce back? But the risks are inherent.
Right. One thing that was interesting, and I find it kind of amusing that I'm about to bring this up in my podcast because I never thought, you know, like I gotta just say, there has never been a day where I thought I would care about football, you know, like me, I would have never seen that coming. Um, but some friends of mine and along with my family, um, have been watching this current series of college football, um, as it's been an interesting season. You know, I didn't really care that much besides Purdue's games because that's like relevant to us, and even that
Yeah,
I didn't really care that much besides like somebody saying, "Oh yeah, Purdue won," and I was like, "Oh, cool."
nice. Yeah,
Yeah, you know, like just something so basic like that. Um, but with UC, University of Cincinnati, that's where my family, like basically my entire family, has gone to like for 3 generations now. So I'm actually the first to um, leave out of state, go somewhere else in
Yeah,
general.
breaking the
So
wheel.
I actually share a very similar story to you, albeit I'm only like one state over versus you. But it's still kind of similar. Anyway, we've been very intrigued by this football game because UC was never really that good of a team. Like, it was just kind of like, just like most teams, you know? Like, we're used to every year being dominated by Georgia and Alabama, you know, the Crimson
Yeah.
Tide, the kings of college football, where they receive all of the best players and most of them go into the NFL. But here, randomly, and this kind of started last year too, and it's a lot more relevant now because one of my best friends goes to UC now, and he's a football guy, so he's really been excited because UC is really good this year.
Yeah.
It's
I mean, they
kind
made
of
it all the way to the semifinals, right?
exactly, yeah. So we were watching, and it was like, holy crap! Like, I think Michigan beat OSU, and they're out. They're usually like the cream of the crop too. So they're out of the bracket, and now UC is number 4 in the nation. It's like, what? They're not even in the same league as these guys. And on New Year's Eve, we all watched the game of them versus Alabama, and like where this ties back to risk, it's like, for one, no one saw this coming, but also, like, you had this team that used to be, like, completely garbage, like, just complete dirt, and now it's fantastic, and it's up against Alabama, like, the football team. Like, I don't think they've played against each other since, like, 1990, I think. Um, so this was a really big deal, and there was a lot on the line if you think about it. It's like they're in the semifinals against arguably the best team in all of college football, you know? And here they are. If they lose, then it's unfortunate, you know? Like, then it's like, okay, well, then the Juggernauts are just going to win like usual. But if they win, then holy crap, you know, like that would be a statement. Like, if they beat Alabama, they would rise up into the finals against whoever that team is, and if they won that, it's like, holy crap, like,
Yeah.
what, you
You're
know?
exactly right.
Now yeah, so unfortunately they lost, but it's interesting to think about this failure, you know? It's like they took a risk and things didn't actually go as planned. Like, we all wanted them to win, but we were unfortunately disappointed with that. But if you think about it, it's like it was a big risk, but they tried their best. They didn't exactly get destroyed. I think it was like 27-6. Alabama had 27. Uh, and ultimately they carried their weight. Even though they lost and it wasn't that great of a loss, it was still something. So I guess with this idea of risks, it's like it a risk can mean whatever you want it to mean, really. It's like, it could be, you could look at it like, oh, UC lost because it sucks and it wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Or you could look at it like, this was a great achievement, and who knows, maybe next year they'll shape up and they'll actually win for real this time.
I mean, certainly, I think it's kind of interesting that you bring that up because for any other team, making it to the semifinals would be a massive achievement. And with all the, as you mentioned, like
Right.
OSU and all the other powerhouses of college football, they have so much support and backing and such a loyal fan
Money, yeah.
base. And for the fact that UC to make it in and kind of show everybody up. I mean, they don't have that kind of money, they don't
Yeah.
have that kind of backing, and yet they still manage to bring their A game and kind of like tell all the other universities off. It's like that. It's a quintessential underdog story.
Right, yeah.
And
I didn't even think
I
about
mean,
that,
the
but
fact
yeah.
that they even made it so far, like the number 4 team in the country. I mean, can you imagine? Like, I don't even know how many universities there are that even have a college football team. It's probably in the 500s range or something, and they're number 4.
Right. Right. And they're not even a football school. They're in a different
Exactly.
league.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people might not consider it good enough, but I consider it such a monumental achievement. I mean, and now they're going to the Big 12, I believe, something of that sort, and maybe they'll be the next powerhouses of that league too.
Right. It's, like a risk it's interesting in that regard. It's like when you lose, and, actually, before I say that, like, let's think about failure for a second. Because one of the things that I liked about your initial definition when I asked you what is a risk, you mentioned danger, but nowhere did you say failure. And I found that interesting because a risk, like losing a risk or whatever, not about failing, It's about danger and maybe you'll lose something, but I feel like failure is different. What do you think about that?
I agree with you. I think failure in its own right, and maybe it has some ties with risks, but on its own,
Mhm.
failure isn't a risk. It shouldn't be, at least for me personally, you really shouldn't be thinking about failure as something as a drawback. Because say that in the end that you do fail, it might fail, like it might sting and it might hurt and it might like set you back. But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you can take what you learned from that failure and apply it to everything else. And this kind of ties into this kind of ties into the fact that determination versus failure. How much do people have to fail, and how much do people have to learn and grow in order to succeed? For some people, it
Yeah.
is a few failures. For other people, it's many. And if people like anybody who thinks that people don't suffer failure is mistaken. I mean, even the best of the best have to face failure at some point. And the way that you're able to face failure and to come back from it is what kind of separates the cream of the crop from everybody else.
Right. I would agree with that.
And the fact that I think like the interaction between failure and risk is that with risk, there's always going to be a chance of failure, or what. But the chance of failure isn't the worst thing that can happen because a failure is something that you can take and then you can kind of reshape it and help you as kind of like some kind of teaching tool, some kind of learning tool. But in a risk, there's also
Yep.
other dangers that can, fully take you out of the game, out of the running entirely. And
Right.
I think having a more severe form of loss of failure is more than just taking, like losing a step or something of that sort.
Right. It's like the difference between getting hurt in the football game where you literally can't play anymore versus just losing the game after you tried your best.
Exactly.
We're like, there's definitely dangers to the risks, but I love that you said the word reshape because that encompasses all of it. Because a failure is kind of it's like a neutral thing, It's it's whatever you want it to be. Do you want this failure to be a degradation of your character? Do you want to treat it like that? It's like if you got rejected by that person, do you want to like hold this failure as your badge of wow, I am unlovable and worthless? I mean, you could do that, buddy. You could do that. But also you could reshape it in the sense of I failed, but let's think about this critically. Maybe I was not on the top of my game. Maybe this was not the right person for me. Maybe they're just not in a good place in their life right now for a relationship. Maybe I'm not ready for a relationship. Maybe this was actually a good thing because I'm not ready for a relationship, Like it could be different
Exactly.
things.
And
And like with what were you
sorry, I
saying?
was just on the other hand, there's also the danger of success. If you have too much success,
Right.
when do you take that all that success to be a positive thing, or can it turn into a negative and you get complacent?
Right.
Sorry to cut you off.
Because it's like, no, that's good, because it's like, think about somebody who buys a lottery ticket and, they're just some gambler who's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna put some money in the lottery and see what happens, and a lot of money in the lottery, and then they actually win. And it's like, holy crap, I just won the lottery. And they get like a ton of money. But then what you notice oftentimes is that these people, these very people who won the lottery, like a 1 in a million chance, are the same people who end up feeling really hopeless and sad in their life. And it's like, why would this happen? And it happened because they didn't really feel this sense that they earned that money. Or maybe they blew it all and now they have nothing.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know?
there's also the, like as you mentioned with the lottery, is that even if someone were to win the lottery, there's also the problem of habit. The fact that people are willing to go and buy lottery tickets just because they win the lottery doesn't mean they're going to stop. It might
Right.
be people. Someone might take that victory and say, "Hey, I won the lottery. How about I can? If that means I won the lottery, I can certainly do it again."
Yep.
And
That's
that
yep.
kind of deals with the whole thing of what are people's habits and how do they, and how does a different situation, how do they react under those things? And for the most part, people tend to fall back on those tendencies that they have. I mean, another thing that I think is really, really interesting thing to think about is a lot of pro athletes, such as wrestlers and the like, they make a crap ton of money while they're fighting and playing and everything. But once they retire, they don't have that financial backing anymore, but they still live that lavish lifestyle. And soon you see all these different stories and photos of these big athletes who all of a sudden are running out of money, and let's say they get hurt or they need some kind of help, and all they need now they have GoFundMe's for different operations and the like. Um, so even just habit itself can be a bit of a danger.
Right. Because like, I don't know, you see that not just with athletes, but like pop stars or whatever. Like Britney Spears was like the king of pop in the early 2000s, and then in like '07 she was like I don't know, found drunk by her car and just an utter mess, and was under parole uh for like a long time. And there was like a story about that like last year, I think. But uh it's, you look at these people like, wow, they have it all together, but sometimes, as you said, that success can really kind of destroy them.
Yeah, as usually like in life, everything is a risk. The risk sometimes pays off, sometimes it doesn't, um, and the risks themselves have risks. So it's riskception, if you will.
Right. Kind of funny. It's like that one DJ Khaled meme of like suffering from success. I think that was like an album or something. Have you seen that meme?
Uh, I think I have. Yeah, it's like I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he has like his hand on his face and it's like an
Yeah,
album
yeah,
cover. It says suffering from success. It's like, this is just a dumb meme that floats around like forums like Reddit or whatever, but I always find it funny because it's like, this is actually really applicable, guys.
yeah. I mean, a lot of people want to reach success, um, but what are they willing to risk? What are they willing to risk to reach that success, and what will they do once they get it? That's the other question that has to be asked.
Right. So let's ask that question. What are we willing to forgo
Um,
for success?
I mean, it doesn't have to be just for success. I mean, for any goal that you want, any ambition, any motivation, what are you willing to risk that you have? I mean, some people, they're willing to risk everything. They're willing to risk their livelihoods, their jobs, their money, um, all their time and effort and everything just for this one goal. And for other people, they might not be willing to risk that much. They might be willing to risk, maybe a small portion of their time or money or effort. Um, and each situation is different. So for like, let's say someone had the ambition to run for office and find themselves in some kind of cabinet position or some sort. The risk needed to take that is insane. The amount of money and time and effort that you need to be able to reach that goal is insane. And some people may not need that or want that kind of time and effort into it. I mean, there's this kind of feeling that in some things you feel entitled to some kind of thing, whether it be you feel entitled to a job, or you feel entitled to wealth, or entitled to a reputation. But sometimes what you're entitled to and what you actually have, or what your goals in mind are, don't line up. And the fact that you need to navigate what you feel you're entitled to versus what you actually want and how you achieve those goals is inherently a risk in its own right.
Right. It's there's definitely a lot to it. And one of the examples that kind of going a little away from that, I just thought of this example.
Ooh.
So I remember talking to a good friend of mine. I saw him over Thanksgiving break after a while of not seeing him. And we had, we basically caught up after a while because we were both at school and a lot of things have happened since the last time we conversed. So we were kind of just catching up, and it was really interesting because he was telling me about his girlfriend that he had for a while. And I was like, how are things between you guys? And he was like, we actually had a lot of conflict, and at one point we broke up. And I was like, actually taken aback by that. I was like, whoa, what happened? Like, I thought this was pretty good. And he explained to me like a lot of things were starting to go wrong, like, I don't know, just different things where she had kind of like social anxiety or something, and it made it a little hard to there were just kind of disagreements, disconnects between them. They both weren't exactly getting what they wanted, and they didn't know how to communicate with it. So at one point, they just kind of broke up after a lot of months of something good. And it was really interesting hearing all of this because this is a very common occurrence. Like, this is not exactly something out of the blue in terms of like relationships these days. But I found it interesting. I know I probably said that phrase like 3,000 times, but I liked what he had to say afterwards, where it was kind of a fake out because he said, well, we broke up, but it only really lasted a day. And I was like, huh, that's kind of odd. So you got together again like the next day? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, why? Like, that's pretty odd. I was like, what made you do that? And he told me, I'm speaking from his point of view. I thought about it. I knew that I was angry at the time and this whole thing was impulsive, but when I really sat down and thought about it, I asked myself the question, is she someone I want to let go, or is she someone worth fighting for? And I feel like that's a very important concept to grasp, especially in the relationship game these days.
I mean,
who's somebody worth fighting for, Like, that's such a big question. Because oftentimes we might feel compelled to call it a quits after minor or even major upsets. And sometimes there's good reasons for it. But it's really incredible to see an example of one of those major upsets that's been brewing for a while, but at the point of climax where they just flat out end it, they come back because they realize they have the conviction that you are so important to me and you are worth fighting for. And even though we had this little tension between us and this fight, you are worth more to me than this little upset to get under my skin. And it's really interesting to think about that risk factor, because it's this idea that success is a risk too. Even when you get into the relationship, a lot of the first part of the episode was talking about before you get into one, but this is after one, and it has its own set of challenges and risks. And again, sometimes we feel so compelled to pull the plug when something goes wrong, or maybe I don't want to do this anymore. Maybe I feel trapped. I get it. I get it. But it's insane to think about the idea that what if somebody really is worth fighting for?
And
And I feel like that could be a concept that we might not think about as often, but it could easily be the case.
I totally agree with you. I think that example you provided was just one of those powerful examples of, stepping back and trying to look at things from a new perspective and realizing, um, what are you willing to lose? So in this case, your friend was kind of doing kind of like a risk analysis, kind of where he was asking himself, am I willing to lose this person that I've been with for the last few years? And what do I gain from it?
Right.
I mean, sure, I might gain new experiences, I might gain more insight into myself, and I might find someone new. But I also might,
And you don't have to deal with this stuff
exactly,
too,
you
yeah.
also might find more heartbreak, you might find regret, you might find,
Right.
if I might find it difficult to begin new relationships, the wounds might be just a bit too fresh, and they might need time to heal. And while inherently that may not be a bad thing, if you wanna like be in a relationship, that might not be helpful. And I truly wish your friends the best with their relationship. It seems like everything's working out for the most part. And I mean that these things happen in a relationship. No relationship is ever going to be perfect. I am of the firm belief that soulmates don't
Right.
exist. But some
Right.
people just have sometimes in a relationship you just have to understand each other's point of view and try to work through it together. Because as long as there's trust, then I don't think there should be any issues. I mean that kind of deals with the the different phases of a relationship. The honeymoon phase, and then the conflict phase, then the working through it phase kind of thing, where at first everything's all dandy, you see everything through rose tinted glasses, and then as you go forward, you start to realize more of the quirks and more of the issues that you may have with each other, and then you start to get into more conflicts, and then there's more issues. But eventually, if there's enough, and at this point, most really like a relationship that's not solid will fail. But if there's trust and if there's a good connection, then it keeps moving forward.
Right. But think about this, Ron. Think about this. I agree. I actually agree with you that soulmates don't exist, in the sense that it's like, I don't know, it seems a bit too whimsical, a bit too Romeo and Juliet-esque. Like it's hard to believe that there's somebody like just built for you. But think about it this way. I think a soulmate, it's not something that exists as in like you just find it in nature, but it's something you create. And what I mean by that is through effort and love and mutual understanding and communication, honesty, trust, all of these good things, you can take somebody who, you could take this dynamic with somebody where you like them because they're attractive or smart or whatever these simple features are, that you like about them. You can take this dynamic that you gain from this. Like, you like them for these reasons, they like you for these reasons, now you're together. And when you work together and think about what you want, you share your values, you make sure that you align where it matters most, and you start thinking of a future together. It's not that you were inherently meant for each other, but through the growth that you share together, and really just this principle of, are you worth fighting for? Are you someone, not that I blindly love because life is just a nice, like, Disney movie, but are you somebody whom I'm willing to sit like sit through the heartache. I'm willing to go long distance while you're out of college, like states away. Like, are you somebody who I want to be that shoulder for you to lean on when you're crying? Like, you have to really evaluate these things. It's like when you truly love somebody, you don't just love them for the good moments, but you love them in the bad moments. You love every hard conversation that you ever have, whether it's about politics or about family issues or about like solving an aggression that occurred because you said something dumb or something. You know, like that's love when you value these hard conversations, because that means you're having them, because the fact that you're having these hard conversations means that you care enough to have them and work through them, and you aren't hiding anything from them. You're being honest with them because you care about them. And that's the bottom line. It's not this whimsical fairy tale, but it's real and it's hard.
Yeah.
But you can make it work. But you have to ask yourself the question, do I care?
And
And how much do I love them? And are they worth fighting for? Because they can be. They can be.
I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think
This is the part where I'm tossing the cigarette.
just let it drift through your fingers through the air. I
Right.
mean, I think in
Yeah.
any kind of connection and any kind of interaction between two people, there always has to be some kind of boundary. So, what are you willing to give up in order to, make it work? And what are you willing to stay firm on? I mean, there's this whole concept of red flags. So, are
Right.
you, if you're in a relationship, when you have like, if someone is always, concerned with themselves and they don't care about your feelings or your opinions, and they kind of view you as like the side character to their own story, is that someone that you really
Right.
want to be with? You want to be someone else's, sidekick in a way, or do you want
Yeah.
someone who will view you as an equal? And in these kind of situations, there's always kind of like the give and go, and the fact that there are these kind of boundaries is what causes these conflicts in the first place. But as you mentioned, if you care about the other person enough, you care about their feelings, and you care about all the different types of, all the different types of things that, maybe might irk you or maybe might, make you mad, but you just care about them enough that you're willing to, give up so much, then I think that truly is something worth fighting for.
Yeah. And usually when you want to pursue these types of things, it's like you want to make sure that it's based on a friendship first, because it's not just that friendship is the foundation as it should be, but also when you're friends for a while, you can gauge the success rate of a relationship, because it's like through your regular conversations, you can see what type of person this person's like. So if you're, for instance, if you know that your friend is a bit possessive and you know already that you don't like that, you're probably going to see a relatively low success rate off the bat. So friendship is not just essential as a foundation, as a relationship is really just the DLC to the
Right.
friendship, or the expansion pack or whatever. It's also a gauge, because you shouldn't just enter this thing without knowing what you're getting into. But also another thing is there's always going to be irks and aggressions and things that bother you. But you have to, at the end of the day, set aside, like, I know this thing is really annoying, and if it's really annoying, maybe I can address it, but also, what am I willing to deal with? And hopefully someday you can start to love them for everything about them, rather than just kind of, I love you when blank,
Yeah.
like, it shouldn't be a situational thing. But I don't know, I guess you just have to have the mindset of, I want this, I want you, I want this to work, I care about you, I want to have a future with you, and I want to, you're somebody worth fighting for.
Exactly. And I think once you're willing to, fight for what you want, fight whether it be the people that you love or, the goals that you want to achieve, and then once you're able to do that, then you're able to face any risk in the world, where you kind of, or even though it may be dangerous, and there's always a risk of not only just failure, but something even bigger than failure. But as long as you have that kind of
Right.
ambition, that drive, and you kind of see the end goal, then I'm of the firm belief that you should and should and could do those things, pursue your dreams, even if it is a risk. Um, and in doing so, better your own self.
Yeah. And I guess that's the main takeaway from this episode. Like, just think about what risks you want to take. Think about what you may lose. Think about what you may gain. And at the end of the day, like, it's not bad to take a risk sometimes. Sometimes it's essential, Like, if you would have stayed in your home state and never took the risk of coming to a faraway university, you wouldn't have been on this show. You wouldn't have known me. You wouldn't have done any of the opportunities or met the friends you found
Yeah,
here,
I mean, I'm truly am really thankful and really happy to have met you. And I know that this
Appreciate
is
that.
just the beginning, Casey. Just
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get YouTube famous. I don't know. But either way, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave the audience with before we end things off here?
I guess if I had to say anything, it would be, uh, you know, don't be afraid to take risks, but also don't be afraid to sometimes ignore the risks. Because as I mentioned before, I'm not the one who, wants to jump straight into things. And sometimes that's a detriment. Sometimes I feel that if I were more just, go with the flow, more, just let's do this kind of thing, then, more opportunities would show themselves. Because if you tend to think things through too much, then you'll never reach the goals. Because while you're spending the time to, go through every plan, somebody else is going through with it. And in order to
Right.
really pursue your dreams, pursue what you want, take the risks, but be mindful of the consequences and be able to deal with the consequences if they do arise.
Right. And a dream is important too, I feel, because that kind of, why even take a risk if it's not heading towards your
Exactly. I
dreams?
mean, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say, I guess if you have a dream of becoming the first lizard, I don't know, that's something really stupid, then go for it. But
Like the Amazing Spider-Man.
sure. Yeah, that was a good movie, by the way. That was a good movie.
I actually just rewatched that after the new one.
It was a good
It's a
movie.
good one. It was a good movie. All right. Well, anyway, thanks for joining me, Ron. This has been a very exciting episode.
Thank you very much, Casey, for having me, and I wish you the best and to stay safe amidst all this pandemic stuff.
Thank you, and you as well. And to everybody listening, thank you for doing so, and I'll see you guys next time.